You're listening to a CNA podcast.
If the Earth was a patient coming to get a checkup at the doctor, what sort of health would it be in? Would we be worried about their vital signs? Highly likely. This patient clearly hasn't been well cared for. They've got a temperature or a fever. They're struggling to cope. Is it a terminal illness? Well, that might take some more investigation. Today, we do our own planetary health check. Less than 3 months out from vital climate talks in Brazil. Hello and welcome to Climate Conversations. I'm Jack Board. Hello to Liling Tan. Welcome back from your summer break. Are you back with some fresh new perspectives for us?
Hi, Jack. Yes. I was in France the past few weeks and got a taste of I believe it was the second heat wave of the summer there. And of course,
Lovely.
they had, lovely indeed. And of course, with limited air conditioning options, it was a little rough at first. But you know what? I've actually acclimated. And when I got back to Singapore this week, I found that air conditioning here was just too cold for comfort. So it took a while for me to get used to the AC.
Okay, so what you're telling me is you're just going to do away with it now and you're going to live this
It did cross
French
my mind.
Riviera lifestyle in Singapore.
Well,
Is that what you're saying?
unfortunately, I wish that were the case, but it's too humid here, I think, for me to last very long without AC. But it did cross my mind. I thought it might be a good idea to try and stay away from the AC for a while. Now, the other thing that really stood out for me while I was away is how recycling and composting is such a way of life there, as is the awareness around waste reduction. I kind of wish it were more the case here in Singapore as well. Also, litter there is getting better. I was in the countryside mostly, but streets there are pretty much litter-free these days. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of dog poo, which France is notorious for. But hey, baby steps, right?
Yeah, I still don't get that, why people are not picking up after their dogs. But I'm glad to see that some things are progressing. But you live in a very clean city already.
I do.
Waste reduction, maybe not so much Singapore's strength, but at least the streets are clean mostly.
Yeah, they are. Can't complain.
I can complain a little bit over here, but, different challenges. Okay, let's get into the quiz for this week.
Bring it on.
Pretty straightforward one for you. Can you answer me this? What percentage of Americans say they support global climate policy efforts aimed at reducing global warming? And that's all despite Donald Trump calling climate change a hoax, withdrawing the US from the Paris Agreement, you name it. He's on the offensive when it comes to climate policy. And I should say that this research was done by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and they covered actually 20 countries, but I thought the US finding was interesting. So what do you reckon?
I think it's quite a sizable percentage, right? If I'm not wrong, it did jump quite a bit over the past few years. I'm going to go with more than half, maybe more. I think the notion that climate change is a hoax is increasingly becoming an antiquated view as weather systems, erratic weather starts to hit home, especially across the Midwest. So.
Yeah, right. Pretty tough to deny at this point. But the answer was going to be at the end. Let's see how you go. Now it's time for our main story this week. When it comes to the climate change discussion broadly, it always seems like we're at an important junction, a tipping point, a time to get moving and take action. And given the scale of the challenge, that's kind of true.
It is. I mean, we've talked about this, about the tipping point for a while across our episodes. And some expert views are that we've already passed that tipping point, that we've tipped. While some other studies say we may not have passed it yet, but we're getting closer to that tipping point than initially thought. So when it comes to taking action, I think no better time than the present, better late than never, right?
Semantics, right? If we've hit it or we haven't hit it or we're getting near to it.
Yeah.
I think it's also useful as well, though, to look at what's been achieved, what's been misunderstood, or what small warning sign now is a clue about what's to come. To put into context the sense of being at a crossroad. So we're going to do a little review of the year so far and the general climate movement through 7. Yes, you heard that right. 7 different categories that we've been working really hard to put together.
And we're going to start on a positive note, as we always like to do, with our first category coming up on a good news story that we can cheer on. What's the goodest news story you've seen so far this year, Jack?
To be honest, this is the first category. It was the hardest one. It's been hard to find the good news. It seems like every good news has whatever the opposite of a silver lining is. I'll start us off, though. I don't think we can go past one of the most significant climate stories in recent years, which is the landmark ruling at the International Court of Justice. So the court there ruled that governments do have a legal duty to stop dangerous warming and to help people already harmed by it. And the judges called for, quote, deep, rapid, and sustained emission cuts. And they said that inaction can breach basic human rights. So this is a big deal. Certainly some commentators have called this as significant or right up there with the Paris Agreement. And these types of court opinions do carry huge weight. So we can likely expect a rush of new lawsuits in countries' domestic courts, demanding tougher climate laws or financial compensation for hard-hit communities. Just a little shout out, this is the story that probably came second for me, to the family of beavers in Czechia that constructed a series of dams to restore an important wetland. And basically these beavers built the dam right where the government had been planning to build its own infrastructure. And in doing so, it saved taxpayers about $1.2 million. So nature, they only had wood and mud and stones, but they did the job. It'll have huge benefits for water retention and biodiversity. So we don't always have to pour concrete and find human infrastructure when you got beavers around.
That's right. Beavers to the rescue where humans have failed. That's something to chew on. Get it?
Wow.
Chew on.
Yeah, I got it.
My good news story is also energy related. So in a review earlier this year by energy think tank Ember, clean power surpassed 40% of total global electricity last year. And that's thanks in huge part to growth in solar power generation, followed by wind power. And Europe drove much of these gains, hitting over 70% of clean electricity last year. So that's some good news that we can cheer on.
Did that surprise you that we'd reached 40%?
Yeah, it did. I really wasn't tracking this that much.
If you look at the graph from Ember, the clean global electricity generation from renewables in 2000 was about 36%. Since then, we've seen nuclear go down a lot and we've seen hydro go down a lot and basically just been replaced by wind and solar. So yes, in some way, I think it's good news because we're using new technologies and relying less on controversial technologies like hydro and nuclear. But overall, the game hasn't changed that much in 25 years. Okay, category 2 was the stat that stopped us scrolling. For me, this one was surprising. You might remember about 2 years ago at COP28 in Dubai, there was a global agreement to triple global renewable energy capacity by 2030. And that seemed fairly significant. It would fundamentally change energy systems around the world. And as you've just mentioned, we are increasing the amount of renewables in the system. We're talking 11 terawatts of installed power. Li-Ling, I don't really even know how to tell you about that number. It's a lot. It's enough juice to light more than 1 trillion LED bulbs, apparently. It could run billions of homes, replace the output of several thousand giant fossil fuel plants. Here's the stat you've been waiting for. Total global ambition since that agreement has increased by just 2%. And that's also according to Ember. So what's been pledged is like way short of that number. So right now we're about 7.4 terawatts in what governments have said they're going to install. So there's a big shortcoming there, and it's a clear lack of ambition. Ember says it shows that countries are just doing this slowly on their own time within their own national frameworks, regardless of the big picture and the global commitment that maybe they forgot that they signed up to. Okay,
well, for me, one of the scariest data sets came from the World Meteorological Organization, which projects an 86% chance that will see temperatures breach the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold in one of the next 5 years. And that would mean more erratic and extreme weather events like heat waves and floods, water shortages, biodiversity loss. I mean, we're talking about the potential complete loss of coral reefs, further melting of ice sheets, and of course, the irreversible impact from all these on human life. So there you go, big tipping point likely to come soon.
I presume that also accounts for the chance that we could breach it multiple times.
Scary stuff, yep. Next up.
A policy move that's been flying under the radar. Now, we're not really policy boffins, but we keep our eyes peeled on what's happening in various countries. I think that moves to create rules and partnerships around carbon trading are happening all the time, and they could really be significant. We don't really pay attention to it that much. Singapore is heavily involved in this, so some of our listeners might actually be finely attuned to developments in this space. And basically, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement lays out all these mechanisms for international carbon trading, basically allowing countries to buy or sell emissions reductions to meet their own climate targets. And potentially, it's a really important solution which would allow many countries to further promote and develop their own green projects and in the long run cut emissions. So throughout this year, Singapore has signed new carbon trading agreements with Bhutan, Peru, Rwanda, Chile, and Paraguay. The most recent one was a carbon credits collaboration agreement with Thailand earlier this month. It's always complex to kind of follow what these mean, but things are happening in this space, and I think it could be, an important part of the solutions going forward.
The good thing is that countries are doing this with each other in the absence of like an overarching, united,
exactly,
international carbon trading mechanism, that these different countries are conducting their own bilateral negotiations for carbon trading. And I think that's a good step forward. Also in Singapore, something that isn't really making a lot of headlines around the world, but it's kind of a big deal here, is that the country has started this year mandatory climate reporting for listed companies on scope 1 and 2 emissions. Now, this puts Singapore among a handful of countries that have made this compulsory, but it is the first in Asia to do so. And then later on in fiscal year 2027, non-listed large companies with at least 1 billion Singapore dollars in annual revenue or at least $500 million in assets will have to undertake these climate disclosures as well. It's, like I said, is a big deal locally, but not so much on the global policy radar.
500 million in assets. Will you be impacted by some of these changes?
Well, I wish I had $500 million in assets.
I don't think you'd be sitting here with us.
No, I wouldn't.
Oh, maybe you'd be a guest, though.
I could be a guest talking about this, but no.
Yep, good one. I think it's important, and I think a lot more of the world potentially will be doing these scope
disclosures.
Emissions. Yep. Okay, number 4, little COP countdown check-in. So the next edition of the UN climate talks, COP30 in Brazil, is going to be held in November, and it's meant to be a really significant one. It'll be held in the Amazon rainforest. So already that sparks some curiosity and just a few sustainability concerns about bringing what is now this huge roadshow of tens of thousands of people into a precious ecosystem. There is a lot at stake. There's a lot to discuss, as usual. I'm interested to see what happens on deforestation. Brazil has already pledged to achieve zero deforestation by 2030. So that seems wildly optimistic when we know that still some 1.2 million hectares of forest was lost in 2024. And that's not including what was lost from fires, which are, of course, connected to climate as well. Expect the Brazilian COP leadership to be really promoting this issue at the forefront of its agenda. Obviously, forests are critical for mitigating global warming, sequestering carbon, and biodiversity balance. It's a big issue in our region too, so I'll be keen to watch if there are any developments there in Belém.
For me, I'm looking to see developments around water security. at COP30. I think that's one of the priority areas. We've talked about this as well on the shows, the impact of droughts and dry spells on countries that are seeing extreme rainfall become more regular and intense. And as we know, dry ground makes it harder for water absorption, and that makes flooding even worse. But when it comes to COP30 check-ins, I'm more interested in the actual literal check-ins, given the logistical nightmare to get to Belém and the shortage in hotel accommodation, right?
All right, you want to watch
right.
You want to watch a train wreck in slow motion.
Yeah, well, it's hard to ignore the potential train wreck, right? There's also the carbon footprint. We see criticism every year about the number of flights that are required to transport these delegations to these locations. And this year's location is so much more remote than what we've seen in the past.
Right.
So my eyes is on how much more backlash we'll get over the aviation emissions to fly delegations there, and then possibly even house them on cruise ships powered by a mix of diesel and biodiesel. But these cruise ships also have a higher carbon footprint than hotels. Now, we're also already seeing criticism about how expensive it is to get there, especially for delegations from developing nations that can't afford it, as well as journalists like us and representatives from various NGOs and other organizations. So it's hard to talk about just transitions when it's so hard to transit.
Yeah, it's hard to actually understate how expensive it is to just send even one individual to an event like this, just from personal experience and knowing what our company considers when we're thinking about sending a team of camera operators with equipment, setting them almost to the furthest part of the planet. You really have to think carefully about whether it's worth it. And we know there'll still be tens of thousands of people there, but are they actually contributing to the problem, or are they helping with these discussions? Could these be done in a more sustainable way? Yeah. Big questions that get raised every year at COP. Okay. Number 5, wildcard weather round. Here I want to focus on a particular weather event, discuss why it matters in this broader picture of disruptive events. We've seen so much of it again this year. And here I go, not even picking a specific event. I don't think we can step past heat though. Heat waves are just so prevalent and significant and headline grabbing. In 2024 already we had the hottest year on record. This year we've seen back-to-back heat waves and Western Europe logging its hottest June on record. Turkey set an all-time national heat record of 50.5 degrees. Japan saw temperature records smashed this month. We saw records as well broken for nighttime temperatures in the Middle East. Central Asia saw the mercury climb 5 to 10 degrees above pre-industrial averages earlier in the year. So forget your 1.5, they're looking at 5 to 10, which is insane.
Yeah.
And in our part of the world, Manila and Jakarta were 2 of 11 cities around the world that experienced unusual heat for nearly 70 days across a 90-day period, which has strong links to climate change. That was according to Climate Central, a US nonprofit. And this story is on repeat. It's not going away. Welcome to the new inferno normal.
All right, I'll see your heat waves and raise you floods.
Okay.
Now, we saw the recent deadly floods and cloudbursts in Pakistan and South Asia. In Pakistan, it killed around 300 people and came just after June floods killed more than 700. The numbers are a little bit here and there, but at this point of our recording, it's probably between 800 and 1,000 people killed from June. I'm sure you remember this. It also follows the 2022 monsoon rains that killed 1,700 people, give or take. It displaced millions of others and cost the country around $40 billion US. And we know Pakistan is vulnerable to climate change due in part to its geography, lack of infrastructure to manage flooding, as well as inefficient warning systems. And then there's the melting glaciers as well. But experts say it's likely to get worse because of climate change, and Pakistan is not the only country. So far this year, countries that have experienced severe flooding in our part of the world alone include India, Indonesia, and Malaysia, as well as Australia, too, your motherland. And farther away, the United States, too, has had its fair share. By late July this year, the National Weather Service had issued more than 3,600 flash flood warnings across the country. And that's close to its average for an entire year. And like your heat waves, this is expected to continue in many parts of the world. So the stories will keep coming.
Yeah, and of course, these stories are connected.
Yes.
They are not standalone events. One causes the other or contributes to the other. Okay, number 6. It's a climate myth that we're here to bust. I'm going to bust the idea that no one cares about climate change.
Oh, we care.
We care. We complain about this all the time as journalists, that it's hard to get climate issues on people's radar. There's so much crazy news happening all the time that this slow-moving crisis doesn't always register. But if we look at what the people are actually telling us, and this is via the 2025 regional survey by the ASEAN Studies Centre. It was called the State of Southeast Asia 2025. It showed that for the first time, climate change actually emerged as the region's top concern based on the people that responded to that survey. It overtook other things like unemployment or geopolitical tensions. So I think this is really illuminating that people really are worried about these issues, and we as journalists need to do a better job of addressing those concerns, packaging the crisis in ways that people can relate to, and that's hopefully what we've been doing here on this podcast.
I think the struggle that a lot of newsrooms have is exactly that, how to make climate news relatable, even as interest in climate grows, right? But also who we want to speak to and how to read the room. Are we, speaking to general audiences? Are we speaking to businesses? Are we speaking to technical experts who already know what the climate landscape looks like? Now, I've often also heard that climate news is niche. And I think that is a myth, because that perception is erroneously limiting simply because it's the one issue. Climate change is the one issue that affects and unites all of us beyond borders, more so than stock market movements, regional and trade wars, even pandemics. The impact is just less immediate, like you said, Jack. It's slow moving. And as we've seen from the past, it's widely treated as a can that we think we can kick further down the road, right? But slowly and surely that's changing as the impact becomes more tangible. A sure sign of that is how much climate news is actually becoming part of daily news coverage, affecting how news is covered across regions and industries and business sectors. So that's a shift that busts the myth of climate apathy. It's starting to matter in common sense and in dollars and cents.
I get a little afraid when I see climate sections of news websites that just cover weather, because there are so many climate-driven weather events. But yeah, so much deeper than that. And we can't do climate storytelling just as another flood, another heat wave. There has to be more to it. Okay, the last one before we get going. A tiny habit with a big impact. Now, as you know, I've railed a bit against individual action as a solution to the climate crisis. Yes, we as individuals can behave with more responsibility with the planet in mind. But without big systemic changes, it's really hard to push the needle. In this section, we're both choosing one little thing, though, that could make a difference. I'm going to go with air conditioning. We've spoken a lot about the rise of the need of AC because of heat waves that are becoming more common. Yes, air conditioning causes lots of problems like localized heating, harmful emissions, and lots of electricity use, but we need it, especially in hot climates like ours. So my personal little tip is just adjust the temperature. I like 26 degrees in my office. At night, 24 or 25, and some people think that's way too warm, but even just putting your device 1 degree higher could help the grid, and it'll save you energy, so it's a win-win.
And you'll acclimatize. Give yourself some time. You'll get used to it. Yeah. Mine is more about waste management. I'm shopping less for clothes and shoes and staying away from fast fashion. I'd rather put money on things that will last. So, there's less material purchased and less waste contribution. I'm also going to learn how to quilt so I can turn all the clothing my child keeps outgrowing into blankets and quilts. And at this rate, she'll never have to buy blankets for the rest of her life. So
she may never need blankets.
No, not with the heat waves coming.
Unless she'll have to turn the aircon down right down to like 15 degrees so she can make use of your blankets. So
maybe I'll turn them into drapes.
Okay.
To block out the sun.
Yeah, keep the sun rays out.
Yeah.
Okay, good one. Okay, back to the quiz. Repeating the question for you. What percentage of Americans say they support global climate policy efforts aimed at reducing global warming?
Definitely more than half. I think quite a bit more than half. I'm going to go with 3/4, 75%, give or take.
Pretty close. I'm going to give it to you. It's close enough. It was 70% of Americans who were in on climate. So I thought that was a little bit higher than I expected given everything that's going on.
I know.
I think the highest in the world was in Japan. So
okay.
There were many different questions about many different aspects. Well worth going to check that out if you're interested in a few more insights about what people around the world are thinking. That was the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Okay, that's all for this week, and that's it for us. We're sad to say that this is the final episode of Climate Conversations.
It's been a good run, and we thank you all for joining us for the past year and a half with Jack and I. The learning curve has been steep, but hey, Jack, I've had a lot of fun doing these with you and the team, and Sai, our producer, who has been with us, holding our hands every week since, May last year?
Yeah, something like that. And likewise, we've really enjoyed bringing, from my count now, 63 episodes over the past year and a bit. So all sorts of topics. This was a podcast that you and I inherited, really. It has had other hosts, Jamie Ho and Julie Yu, who helped build up this small but loyal audience going back several years. And since we've started, we've had so many fun debates and interviewed really interesting people. My personal favorite, done so many quizzes. And I'll miss sharing this space with you, Li-Ling, with all your knowledge and humor and generosity. And yes, even the very gloomy, cynical perspectives that you do like to bring every week.
And of course, your cheerful optimism as a counterpoint to my doom and gloom that will be missed very, very much.
I think we'll have to set up little recordings and I'll just be asking you the quiz questions each week. Otherwise, we don't know what to do with ourselves.
Yeah.
On a Thursday. Yeah. You're like,
and
please
Wednesday,
don't do that. You're like, I think these types of conversations are really important to still be having. Climate issues intersect, as we've said, with so many other areas, our economies, our health, our very survival on this planet. So while we won't be having them here any longer, we'll still be including them in our reporting elsewhere across CNA.
That's right. And do keep checking us out online and on the telly for all things climate, the doom, the gloom, the clean energy boom. And until then, I'm Liling Tan. Goodbye for now and for a bit.
I'm Jack Board. Our thanks to the team that produced this episode. It's been working so hard over the many years and many iterations of this show and others. We appreciate what you do to get these stories out into the world. Saye Win, Tiffany Ang, Janani Johari, Penning Ho, and Nat Fetelvero. Bye for now.